Our show in Bloemfontein, where the state is vehemently opposed to bail for Thabo Bester's partner, Dr Nandipha Magudumana. In her affidavit, Magudumana stated that Bester forced her to leave the country with him. Those allegations dismissed by the state, saying Magudumana was a willing participant. Silindelo Masikane keeping an eye on the proceedings and joining us now from the Free State. So, Slee, it was so interesting in court today. Before we get into the substance of what actually happened, the demeanour of Nandipha Magudumana vastly different to when we last saw her in court, where she was sitting next to Thabo Bester, holding hands, smiles. Today, she's crying in court, she's shaking her head as she hears the charges against her, and she's saying that she was essentially kidnapped by Thabo Bester.
Certainly so. Definitely a different Dr Nandipha Magudumana that we saw in the Bloemfontein Magistrates Court, and of course social media buzz in terms of their reaction to her demeanour, as you've stated, vastly different. You know, a lot of speculation around whether perhaps she's acting. You know, she was visibly emotional. I remember seeing her walking up from the holding cells, and she looked quite nervous in the beginning, and then when her lawyer went into her affidavit and the reasons why she's applying for bail, and just giving a little bit of detail around how she ended up in Tanzania with Thabo Bester, she started getting quite emotional. Tears were streaming down her face. She kept her head hung quite low, not making eye contact with the cameras. Definitely not the same Dr Nandipha that I've encountered in previous occasions in court. But of course, like you've said, she is applying for bail, and she is facing Schedule 5 offences, meaning the onus is on her to show the court why the interests of justice permit her release. But not only that, she needs to provide exceptional circumstances. And I think what we saw her lawyer trying to show the court was that she is a victim herself, that she was forced out of the country, and that she never at any point wanted to leave. A particular paragraph details that Bester forced her into a vehicle, and that she had no idea that her passport was in the car, and that she never had any intention to leave the country. Let's just take a listen to that.
Albeit I have decided to exercise and assert my right to remain silent and not to disclose the basis of my defense until at the appropriate time and forum, I nevertheless wish to provide the following context to how I departed South Africa. 8.1. On or about the 17th of March 2023, I was in company of accused number 5. 8.2. I was instructed and commanded by accused number 5 to get into a vehicle and leave the premises to a destination unknown to me at the time. 8.3. I refused and wanted an explanation, but he forced me into a vehicle. 8.4. I succumbed to the pressures due to the threats he directed at me. 8.5. I was defenseless, helpless, and with no one to report to at that time. 8.6. I complied with his instructions and was taken out of the country against my will.
But of course, the prosecution absolutely not buying this, were they?
Not at all. They believe and have submitted evidence from the investigating officer in opposition of this bail application, saying that Magudumana is not being honest, she's not being truthful with the court. The investigating officer's affidavit went into a lot of detail in terms of establishing a relationship between Bester and Magudumana, saying that they were romantically involved, and that there are several affidavits that Magudumana Magudumana has made, where she claims to be Bester's customary wife, also going into detail about her alleged involvement in the escape plan, labeling her as one of the masterminds, detailing how she went on to claim bodies from state mortuaries here in the Free State to act as a decoy for the escape plan, saying that, you know, she lived with Bester for a long time after his escape, and that these claims that she was forced to participate in these illegal activities is simply untrue. So that was just the affidavit from the investigating officer that was submitted by the state in opposition of the bail. Let's take a listen.
I categorically dispute this allegation. And this was the allegation that she was sort of kidnapped, put in a car, and she found herself in Tanzania. Through thorough investigation, I have established that the applicant was the one who drove from Johannesburg to fetch accused 5 from KwaZulu-Natal after his escape. As stated at paragraph 7.1e above, the applicant and accused 5 rented out a house together. They are both signatories to the lease agreement. My apology. The two, that being applicant and accused 5, were spotted shopping together by the media in March 2023. The applicant and accused 5 traveled together and stayed in Cape Town, where, amongst others, the applicant wrote out a prescription for accused 5 and visited a salon together.
It's completely fascinating to watch Nandipha Magudumana today. As those charges are being read out, she's shaking her head, she's disagreeing with almost everything that is being stated there. But we all remember the images of her looking very lovingly at Thabo Bester just a couple of weeks ago. Now, no one was forcing her to do that in court. Do you think that this is signifying a big change in tactic on the part of her defence team? Do you think that essentially she's now going to cut Thabo Bester loose and saying, I too was a victim of this man?
It seems that's where we're heading. And, you know, in her affidavit, she didn't want to go into a lot of detail, saying that she believes that anything she says during her bail application could be used against her, saying that she wants to give a proper defense during her trial and, in essence, clear her name. But I think we got a snippet into exactly what she's going to be telling the High Court come trial stage, that she herself is a victim of Thabo Bester. I think we'll get a lot more detail about what she claims is the alleged relationship, romantic relationship between them, whether there is one, and exactly how she was forced to participate in, you know, much of the illegal activities that she's been accused of. And like you said, the demeanor in court quite different, especially during the state opposing the application, reading that affidavit from the investigating officer. She looked visibly annoyed, visibly, you know, kind of shocked at what was being alleged by the state in terms of her involvement. And she clearly does seem as though that she is ready to, in essence, for those who believe that she was a willing participant, it does seem as though that she's willing to perhaps throw Bester under the bus moving forward, because she today is saying that she was helpless and she was defenseless and had no one to report, you know, the activity between her and Bester too. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens or transpires during the next court appearance on the 11th of October, where we are expecting all 12 accused once more in the dock. It's going to be interesting to see what the relationship or how they react to each other, because in that last appearance, people were saying that they looked visibly like they were still in love, and that they clearly, you know, knew each other. Some information that we've also received today, Sally, is around around the day of Thabo Bester and Magudumana allegedly fleeing the country. We were sent a still photograph from our sources, which we understand the state is planning to use as evidence against Magudumana and Bester, where you can see that she's seated in the passenger seat. Bester is driving. They are in that Porsche that we've also seen on social media that belongs to Dr. Nandipha, and we understand that that particular still photograph is from CCTV footage that's been gathered as evidence against her. And I think what we're going to see the state doing is trying to show that she wasn't forced to leave the country, that she was a willing participant, and that she was fleeing the country with Bester. So tomorrow we continue with the bail application proceedings. We're expecting closing arguments and perhaps a postponement for the judgment.
Yeah, fascinating indeed. That photograph seems quite telling, but I guess we will have to see what happens tomorrow. Certainly today we saw and heard a lot of detailed information from the state, talking about how her fingerprints had to be used to release the bodies in certain cases. Lots of detailed information. Clearly a lot of work has gone into this. We will follow it with much interest. Thank you so much for today's summary. Of course, that's Silindelo Masikane talking to us about day one of Nandipha Magudumana's bail application, where she has changed her tune, saying she was basically kidnapped and forced to leave the country by Thabo Bester.